Perfect. Thank you all for joining tonight. And as California DECA comes upon its 75th year, we are consistently looking to bring even better things to you guys, such as our very first industry professional champ camp. We're kicking things off strong tonight with Miss Cami Dunaway, who has been the brains behind the marketing strategies of some of the biggest companies in America, serving as the former chief marketing officer of Duolingo, Yahoo, and the EVP of Nintendo. Now a leadership coach, we're absolutely thrilled to have her with us tonight to share a little wisdom and support of DECA's mission of fostering emerging leaders in business. Can we show some love
Mm.
in the chat for Ms. Dunaway?
All right. Thank you so much, Jalen, for that kind introduction. And I am really excited to be here with all of you. I thought that maybe I would take you through a quick tour of my career, actually starting from when I was sitting in the seat that you all are sitting in high school. And then just have plenty of time, leave plenty of time for Q&A. But I was thinking back to high school for me. I grew up in North Carolina and I was a theater kid. That's what I really loved doing, but realized probably in 11th grade that I didn't have the level of talent that would take me, say, to be a Broadway performer or which was it's painful. You know, that first time you realize that something that you really want to do probably isn't the thing that you're going to be best positioned to do. And I was in a really competitive high school and was frequently feeling like, oh man, I'm the slowest one in the fast class. And so uh, in college, things really started to open up for me. And one of the things that was significant in my development is that my father worked for a university and everybody expected me to go to that particular university. It was a good one because I could go there tuition free. And I decided that that wasn't what I wanted to do, that there was another college that I just felt really drawn to. And it was the first big decision that I made where I did something that I felt like I really owned. Unfortunately, my parents were supportive emotionally, but they weren't able to be supportive financially of that. So they said, if you're going to go to this other university, University of Richmond, you're going to have to work. You're going to have to take out loans. We aren't going to be able to, buy you a car, any of those things. So it was a really big, scary decision. And, I just encourage you guys to really embrace the things that might be a little bit uncomfortable as you're making decisions in these next years about where to go to school and not to overemphasize the voices of other people for where you should go, but really make the decision that you can own. Because what that did for me is it just set me on this path of really finding my own voice. And college for me was a time that I just flourished. I figured out through trying a bunch of different kinds of classes that I loved marketing. And all of those things that I had enjoyed as a kid in the theater, I don't know, somehow marketing just satisfied those same desires. I really loved the creativity and surrounding myself with creative people. Um, I almost love the similarity. If you're in theater, you're thinking about characters and about their motivations and how to connect emotionally through them to an audience. And in marketing, you are really thinking also about motivations and consumer needs and how to make that kind of connection between your product and an audience. And so I was really pretty lucky in college to find that I had this real affinity and this real interest for marketing. And, just encourage you all as you start college to try and expand your horizons, take a whole bunch of different classes so that you can see the ones that really connect most to your interest and your gifting. I also learned in college that I didn't necessarily have to be the smartest person in the room to be successful, that it was more about my hard work and my curiosity and relationships that I formed. And so I ended up being very, very successful in college, but it was kind of a different set of skills that I leaned into than maybe what I had tried to focus on in high school. And I was very involved in the American Marketing Association. I got a great internship that led to my first job out of college, where I worked for an advertising agency in Richmond, Virginia. And I loved that work because we got to work on such a variety of clients. I worked on everything from chemical insecticides to a bank to a tourism campaign for Virginia. And so really built this understanding that almost anything can be interesting if you really spend some time trying to understand it, trying to understand the motivations, what makes it successful. And you guys probably experienced that in DECA, where you get exposed to lots of different kinds of business situations. And hopefully you found that sometimes something that might not seem that interesting at first can start to be really interesting as you get into it. And so that was part of what advertising was for me, was the variety, the creative process, being able to be around creative people. And so I worked for two agencies, one in Richmond, Virginia, and one in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then I realized that I wanted to be on the other side of the table. So in advertising, you are making recommendations to clients, but you really aren't the decision maker. And you are focused on the communications, but you're not in control of like the product or the service or the pricing. And all of those things were pretty fascinating to me. So I decided that I wanted to go back and get my MBA so that I could switch from being on the agency side to being on the client side. And I think a lot of times people will ask me, should I get an MBA? And I feel like the reason to get an MBA is because you want to achieve something in your career that you don't see possible without having additional um, training or certification or exposure to other functions. So it was good for me. And certainly having a Harvard MBA opens a lot of doors, gave me a great network and a lot of credibility. And I started my career after business school at Frito-Lay. I was there for 13 years, which is a long time in one place. But one of the advantages of being with a big company like that is that there are a lot of different avenues of growth and a lot of different types um, of experiences that you can explore. So I started in marketing, and then I moved into sales, and then I moved into general management. So in my 13 years, I was changing jobs about every 2 years or so, but also able to do it in a place where I was surrounded by really excellent leaders. And one of the things I think is really important in your first jobs is to optimize for learning. And part of the way that you get the best learning is by putting yourself in situations where you're around the very best people that you can possibly be around. And so I loved my time there, learned a ton. But after 13 years, I started to feel like, um, just feel a little itchy for something else. And one of the rules of thumb I've used is that if I start hitting my snooze button multiple times on a Monday morning, that's a pretty good sign that I need to challenge myself in a new way. So this also was in the early 2000s, where the internet and digital communication was just starting to explode. And I wanted to learn as much about that as possible. So moving from marketing Doritos to marketing Yahoo was just a great way to fully immerse myself in that. And it was pretty scary because I was living in Dallas, Texas. Um, Texas overall has no state income tax. So for those of you who live in California, we have a lot of state income tax. Housing here is really expensive. So it was pretty scary to pick up my family at the time. I have one son at the time he was 3, to pick up my family and move to California because financially it just didn't make sense. But again, I was really trying to optimize for learning, and I wanted to learn about digital and how it was just transforming business than the way marketing worked. So, loved my time at Yahoo. Um, really just picked up all kinds of new tools and techniques. And I think that's important in any sort of business career, but for me, especially as a marketer, while there's some things about consumer needs that are and positioning a brand that are just evergreen, the channels that we use to communicate and to build businesses have changed so much. And so Yahoo really was a chance to just embrace opportunities for growth and new technology. Um, and then I had the opportunity to move to Nintendo as the EVP of sales and marketing. And that's one of those things that, like, how do you turn that down? Particularly at the time, my son was 8 years old, was a huge Pokemon fan. And this was a chance to be like the coolest mom in the world to go run sales and marketing. They had just launched the Wii. Um, and it was a really just exciting time to expand gaming to something that felt relevant to people of all backgrounds and ages and women and men, because up until that time, video games had really been predominantly kind of something that appealed to boys and men. So it was a fun time. Culturally, it was pretty different working for a Japanese company. Japanese companies um, are really focused on excellence, and that sometimes means that they're a little less open to taking risks. And I realized that I'm just someone who learns through trial and error and experimentation and taking risks. And ultimately decided that that wasn't the best environment for me. And that was a really important lesson to realize that you can be a very talented marketer, leader, business person, and you can be working for a company that's a really good company. And you can be successful, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're happy or that it's the environment that's most natural for your style and your skills. So it was a big, big learning for me. And so I left there. I went to a company called Kidzania. That's a global company in the entertainment, education, and business for kids. It was much more entrepreneurial. So it was fun to be back, to be in an environment where I was really rolling up my sleeves and just flying around the world and talking to kids and parents and creating experiences for them. Um, and I didn't have the level of resources that I had at Nintendo or Yahoo. But sometimes being scrappy, I think, is where you really are forced to be even more creative. And so that was a fun time. Um, I took a few years off after 4 years of that, because my son was a junior in high school, and I realized that he was going to be going to college pretty soon, and that as fun as it was to travel all over the world, that I was missing all the jazz concerts and track meets, and I wanted to be a little more present for him. So that was a great opportunity to have more flexibility in my schedule. And I did consulting and I've served on boards. So I still was active, but just with more flexibility. And then after he went to college, I decided that I wanted to get back working for a company. And so I had the opportunity to go to Duolingo, which was just such a exciting experience. I had led really big teams at places like Yahoo and in Nintendo. I was employee number 106 in the company, and I was essentially the only marketer, and my job was to come in and build the marketing team. And I was really excited to see, like, can I do that? Can I build something from scratch and do it with a company that is very focused on mission and really committed to making language learning available to everyone, regardless of their economic ability to pay. So I loved the mission. And I think the older I am, the more important mission in the company is to me. I also really respected the CEO and felt like I could learn from him. So that was great fun, building out that team, really learning how to lean in to the character of Duo, working on the positioning where helping them to clarify this positioning statement that learning a language is hard. So we make it fun because we saw that being motivated, staying motivated to practice a language is the biggest barrier that you have to help someone overcome. And the more fun it is, the more likely they are to open the app and use it. So just bringing fun into everything that we did, from the product to our social media presence, to the way that we did emails or push notifications. So a really exciting chapter of my career. And then 3 years ago, we had taken the company public. I had built out the team. We were getting lots of awards. I knew that we had a world-class team. And so I felt like it was a good time for me to step away and focus on this third phase of my career, which is really about how do I give back, help build the next generation through mentoring and through coaching, through some of the board work and advising that I do. So it's been these three phases of my career, that learning phase, sort of an earning phase, through impact and um, leadership as a chief marketing officer. And now it's really a returning phase where what motivates me is doing anything that I can to help support the next generation of leaders and marketers and entrepreneurs. So, yeah. Shall we go into questions?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. This is definitely an inspiring journey for students that are also interested in maybe pursuing marketing in the future. So, diving a bit more into the challenges that you've encountered in your career, can
Yeah.
you describe a time when you had to pivot or make a significant change in your business strategy and what kind of prompted that change?
Yeah. Um, I'll share two. One was at Nintendo when we decided that we really wanted to expand the gaming category. And I don't know if you all remember, there was a product called Wii that was really revolutionary because people use this handheld device and it was motion activated. And so you didn't have to have a lot of agility with pushing buttons. And that just revolutionized the gaming industry for consoles. And this is before the Switch. So at that time, there were two distinct segments. There were consoles and there were handhelds. And so we've been having a lot of success in the console business, expanding to new audiences, but we were having a little bit less success on the handheld side with the Nintendo DS. And so one of the things that my team and I did was to really build out a more holistic strategy to think about things like what are the software titles that on the handheld side that will bring new audiences in. So there was a title called Nintendogs, for example, that you took care of a little puppy. There were, you know, tapping into things like Animal Crossing, which was just a different kind of game that was much more broadly appealing. So changes to software, also changes to hardware, having colors that had a broader base of appeal. So in the past, it had been like black and gray and blue, and adding purple and lavender and green. And then changing our communication strategy. So we brought in celebrities. We did ads with Beyonce and with Carrie Underwood, and just so that people could see gaming in a new way by watching celebrities do it. And then one of the biggest changes we had to make to our strategy was um, the way we merchandised our product in retail and putting a focus on retailers like Target instead of it just all being GameStop, which was the big retailer at the time. But we had to add ways that people could try out the game and not have to ask a clerk, because up until that time, every software was locked behind a case and you had to find somebody with a key to look at the software titles. So changing the way we merchandised, doing sampling in malls, just like a total revamp of the business strategy by thinking about, okay, if you want to appeal, for example, to a teenage girl, how are you going to do things in a different way that is going to make gaming feel more relevant and more accessible? So that's one. Um, One that I would say was more of a marketing change and more of a leadership change in a way was when I got to Duolingo. One of the things I felt like would be really powerful would be to do more partnerships because we didn't have a lot of money to spend on marketing. So I wanted to be clever and kind of build word of mouth through partnerships. And so I had this big idea to do a partnership with Angry Birds. I don't know if any of you all play Angry Birds. Maybe this came from my gaming background too. They were doing like a 10th anniversary. And so I thought, oh, we need to do a collab between Duo, he's a bird, and the big birds and Angry Birds. And it was a really solid idea, but in order to execute it, it required a lot of engineering work and a lot of changes to the product, which even though it didn't cost marketing dollars, it energy. And I pushed it really hard. So I pushed it through successfully. And it wasn't a failure, but it wasn't a huge success. And so the return on investment, particularly in thinking about the engineering time, was not positive. And so it was a little bit of a personal failure for me and required me to go back and really rethink, okay, how do we do marketing in a way that doesn't require so much product change, which was part of what led us to being more of the social first strategy that then became really successful for Duolingo because we didn't have to involve engineers in doing TikToks, for example.
Yeah. So kind of on around the same lines as when you were talking about the idea of things changing, like the Wii, how across
Yeah.
the decades things change. Like you have the Xbox, you have the PS4, so it gets a lot more competitive. But along those same lines, what's something you'd encourage people to start doing this year, 2025, 2026, compared to how people did it in the past? Like what's something that can change
Yeah.
people in this current time?
Yeah, well, no surprise to anyone. Probably what I'm going to say is it's really learning how to embrace AI. And as a marketer, figuring out how to use it to um, help increase the efficiency of your team. But I think it requires being really clear on what your brand positioning is, being really clear on what your tone of voice is, and kind of creating the framework that you train the AI on so that your marketing materials still feel very on brand and don't feel like, because I think what's starting to happen now is there's so much noise and everybody's using the same prompts and there's just a sea of sameness. So I think it's figuring out how to maintain your distinct creativity while leveraging the efficiency gains that AI brings. And there's also just huge shifts, particularly in things like search engine optimization. So we've spent a lot of time as marketers in the past 10 years making sure that our websites were optimized with the right keywords, the right tags, so that they would show up as high in organic search as possible. And now with Gemini, for example, like the algorithms work totally differently. And so people are now talking about, like, rather than SEO, it's AEO. And it really prioritizes things like how you show up in Wikipedia or what's being said about you on Reddit. So I serve on the board of Planet Fitness, and I was just talking to our chief marketing officer about this and said, like Gemini is returning Wikipedia results as one of the first things that people see now when they search Planet Fitness. And our Wikipedia actually is just factually wrong. And it's saying stuff about us that's incorrect. And while you can't go in and directly edit that, you can certainly do things to, when there's factual inaccuracies, to correct that. Um, and you just have to be conscious of ways that your company is showing up and that its reputation is being discussed, because those are the things that are going to really impact your search. So that's just an example of something that in the course of a year has changed dramatically from what we were used to in the past.
Yeah, and to kind of keep on that topic of how you can like stay updated on those quickly changing trends, what are some important sources like social media accounts, books, news outlets, channels, etc. that you use to that you recommend to keep updated on marketing and business trends or that you enjoy?
Yeah. So I enjoy Fast Company a lot. I think, and they've got newsletters that I think are really, really good. I still read Ad Age because I think it has a lot of great information about marketing trends. Um, there's a there's several Substacks. One is called Pollinator that I like. And I can put together some. I should have thought and put together a list beforehand, but those are some that come to mind. But certainly Substack is the place where a lot of really interesting conversations are going on. And I think Zaria, my old Duolingo colleague, has a new Substack called Make It Viral. And her stuff is always good. Um, so yeah, and I think just kind of your own interest as a consumer, I think is also something that can really inform you as a marketer, just to be curious about, oh, there's this new brand that everybody seems to be talking about. What is it that's making it interesting? What channels are they using? Just to really lean into your own curiosity. And that's the thing that's going to work for you for the next 30, 40 years of your career, is just asking good questions and really striving to be curious about the world.
Yeah, so you mentioned how you had to work with a lot of teams, you had to lead a lot of teams, and you even mentioned how
So,
large these amount of members there were in your team. So what do you think is the number one leadership tip that you've learned from your whole experiences throughout your journey?
Yeah. So the number one for me is to to care about people and to let them know that you see them, you value them. Um, having a good rhythm of interacting with people on your team. So, doing regular meetings, not with just your direct reports, but with people 2 levels down, 3 levels down, doing town hall experiences, just really listening and creating an environment where people feel like they can bring their whole self to work. So, one of my practices from a pretty early time in my leadership career was starting all my meetings with people sharing a personal win and a professional win. Because the more that I got to know about what people cared about outside of work. And the more they got to know that about each other, the more that it created an environment of trust and mutual respect. And when you have trust and mutual respect, that's when you have the energy that enables you to really experiment and try and learn from failures and kind of collaborate in ways that create bigger successes and bigger ideas than just any one person.
And so, what skill do you think that young people underestimate the most, but it actually matters the most in leadership?
Um, there's two, I think. Um, One is learning how to ask good questions. I think that particularly when we're early in our career, that we feel a lot of pressure to have the right answers. And, there's a phrase that essentially goes, a question well asked is half answered. And I really think that that's true. And I think it can be just a superpower to be the person in the meeting who asks a perceptive question. And in some ways, it's a whole lot easier to get good at asking the right question than it is thinking that you always have to have the answer. And I was fortunate to learn that pretty early in my career at Frito-Lay. I moved from marketing out into sales. And so I was managing a group. I went from managing like other MBAs to managing a group of salespeople who um, many of them didn't go to college, but they knew a lot more about selling than I did. And so I had to get comfortable with the fact that I couldn't really teach them to sell, and if I tried to teach them to sell, I would look ridiculous and I would probably hurt our results. And that was a little uncomfortable at first because I could teach marketers how to market and I was used to kind of having the answers. But that was an experience that taught me no, I don't have to have the answers. I have to show that I care about people. I have to ask good questions. I have to help eliminate barriers for them. And learning that skill in what was I probably then in my early 30s, I think that just accelerated my career. Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable in a way. So that would be one, learn to ask good questions. The other one I would say, and I never did master this as much as I wish I had, but learning how to really seek feedback and not take feedback so personally and not feel like you have to defend yourself when someone criticizes an idea. If any of you end up um, studying architecture or design, there's a process that you go through in college called crit, where you literally are like criticizing each other's work. And I think that is such a beneficial thing to embrace because um, your ideas don't get better if you're not open to hearing other people's perspective. And our world is getting so complex that no one has all the right answers. And so I think that particularly for you all in your careers in business, that just being open-minded about feedback and being a person who seeks out feedback, who looks at feedback as like, oh yeah, oh, you're so right. It would be so much better if I tried it this way. And kind of has that growth mindset. I think that will be such an accelerant for your career.
Yeah. So we got a question from Siddharth in chat. He was asking, before deciding on a major marketing shift, how much do you rely on metrics slash data versus gut instinct? And how do you test the idea before you make it global?
Oh, such a good question. And that is one of the things that has really shifted over my career. I had a really personal example of this when I first went to Yahoo because we were doing um, a video creative and they brought me two different versions. And at Frito-Lay, doing big television ads, we had we had done testing, but usually we didn't get the testing until months after the commercial had aired. And so it was more about using the testing just to build up your intuition and your instincts. And so they showed me these ads, and I'm like, well, based on my past experience and what I've seen work and not work, I think this one is the right one. And they're like, well, would you like to see the data? Because we get data like in real time about what actually works. And of course, my instincts weren't right in that particular case. So the fact that we now have the ability to test and learn and iterate and do experiments, the ability to be comfortable with the analytics in marketing is super important. And to be a chief marketing officer, certainly you've got to be both right-brained and left-brained and have the art and the science. Um, so analytics are super important. That being said, there are times when, particularly early on, you have to form hypotheses, even to know what to test, to put into a test. That comes sometimes from your intuition and your instinct and from listening to consumers, listening for pain points. So it's never an either or. It's really about developing both your analytic capability and your intuition and knowing when to lean into which one.
So I have another question from the chat. What is an opinion that you have about marketing or business or even leadership that most people would disagree with?
Oh, what an interesting question. Um, I don't know that it's most people, but it's a lot of people in the Silicon Valley that I'm constantly trying to educate CEOs on. So a lot of CEOs in Silicon Valley think that brand is something that's fuzzy, that's like, oh, you want to do a Super Bowl commercial. They think that brand is kind of like the work of marketing and that it's not measurable and it's fuzzy, soft stuff and it's a waste of money. And so I spend a lot of time trying to educate CEOs that brand is about the promise that you make to a consumer and making sure that that promise is fulfilled in every aspect of your business, from the way you do your customer service to the product that you're providing. Yes, communications is a piece of it, but it's just a small piece. And with that definition, I think of a CEO as being kind of a chief brand officer. So um, that that's one of the things, and particularly because a lot of marketing is very measurable today, a lot of people want it to only be the math. And it's not just math because math isn't the thing that can ultimately make consumers fall in love with your company and share it with friends and family and through word of mouth. So that's an ongoing debate that I feel like I'm engaged in.
Okay, and I think this is going to be one of our last questions, but Neil asked in chat, how can you distinguish between a short-term brand opportunity and long-term brand building move when resources are limited? So, like when you mentioned you were specifically with Duolingo
Yeah.
at first.
Yeah. And let me, I'll actually give you a real example that I'm going through now with, um, I'm on the board of another company called Flow. And Flow is an app for women that supports hormonal health for women. A lot of the women on the call probably use Flow. Hopefully you do. And so we're having these debates about whether or not to invest in a an event next year where we would bring people together to talk about um, issues of women's health, to bring doctors and influencers and different folks together. Um, and we would have metrics like how many press mentions we get, but ultimately, it's about continuing to build trust with women and to really build our credibility as being someone who cares deeply about medical accuracy and privacy and those kinds of topics. And it's a really robust debate because the CEO, we do a lot of performance advertising. So a lot of buying ads on um, TikTok or Meta or Instagram. And we can measure our return on advertising spend, down to the penny and make sure that we are getting more value than what we spend. And so he is very hesitant to do things that have a longer time horizon for impact. But I have just seen time and time again that um, brand attributes like trust can be really um, accretive to your brand value, to your company value. And you definitely can measure them, but you know, it takes months, quarters, sometimes years to really move the needle. And so that's one where there's a difference in horizon between just the instantaneous measurement of a performance ad and measuring something like moving trust that might come from public relations and from doing like an event.
So I know that we're running a bit low on time, but just to squeeze one more question in, we have a
Sure.
question in chat. How did your marketing job vary from company to company? To elaborate, what are some of the marketing techniques or some of your favorite marketing initiatives and campaigns that you think are really smart and unique?
Mhm. So, at Frito-Lay, one, marketing is really well understood. Marketers in consumers packaged goods companies like a Procter and Gamble, a Pepsi, a Frito-Lay, frequently the CEOs of those companies have come up through marketing. And so everybody gets marketing. You're a general manager as a marketer. And that's in contrast to working in a consumer technology company, where typically, like I did at Yahoo, Nintendo, and Duolingo, where typically the CEO is coming out of engineering or product. And so you spend a lot more time educating internally about the way that marketing can really drive business results. So that's one difference I saw, a big difference from Frito-Lay and then consumer technology. In terms of channels, um, At Frito-Lay, we did a lot of big television ads. When you launch a new salty snack, you need it to move off the shelf as quickly as possible so that retailers will keep it on the shelf and so that your salespeople are excited about it. And so you have to build awareness and desire really quickly. And television was, one of the ways, particularly at the time I was there, that we would do that. So that's why you see like Doritos and Pepsi on Super Bowl ads, for example. At Yahoo, we had a lot of different products to support from Yahoo Mail to Yahoo Personals to Yahoo Fantasy Sports to Yahoo Movies. And so we did a lot of what we called buzz marketing. My favorite example of that was Yahoo Personals, which doesn't even exist anymore. But we saw that a lot of our competitors, their ads looked exactly like our ads because we were using all the same stock photos. This is kind of like where we're headed with AI, I think. So we decided to do a casting call among our real users and find people that we could feature in our ads. And we took it one step further. We found one of our users named Julie, and we took out a big billboard in Hollywood, and we had Julie live on the billboard and for 3 days and go on dates. Like people could vote for guys to go up on the billboard and go on dates with her. And we were streaming these dates. And then people could vote on who she should go off of the billboard with and actually go on a date outside of everybody watching. And that was so tremendously successful. We got so much PR coverage for that. And so at Yahoo, we were really good at figuring out how to do these almost like stunty things and then use those to get PR coverage. Um, Nintendo, we did some really cool events where we would bring people in to be hands-on playing games. Particularly, that was a good way to build word of mouth, and especially for things like the Wii, which was really unique interface. You needed people to be able to actually interact with it. And then Duolingo, we took a social first strategy. So it was really about creating virality for our marketing by doing things that were a little bit unhinged, but that people loved and would talk about.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing out, Ms. Dunaway, and thank you all for joining tonight. And thank you again also to Robert Flores, our amazing VP of Southern California, and Jalen Chong, our incredible VP of Leadership, for co-hosting this session. And of course to you, Ms. Dunaway, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to help these future entrepreneurs and business leaders. And on behalf of all of California DECA, we would love, love, love to share our appreciation for you taking this time to share your insights. And also to everyone here, thank you for being so driven and curious and asking some great questions. Like Ms. Dunaway mentioned, asking great questions is the bedrock to a successful journey in anything you pursue. So we really hope you learned something new tonight, and thank you for joining. But before we hop off, we'll pass the mic over to our VP of Marketing, Shrishta Ramji, to take our call photo.
Yeah, once again, thank you
Oh,
so
good.
much. I
You
learned a lot
did.
from that session. I know that we all did. So, yeah, once again, thank you. That was really insightful. So, for a call photo, we wanted to teach you something a little special that we always do with DECA. It's something called a DECA diamond. And so, pretty much what you do is with one of your hands, you go like this. You put your index and your middle finger down. Oh, wait. Sorry, your middle finger and your ring finger down, you get a symbol like this. Do the same thing on your other hand, so you get it like that. And then what you do is you put these together and it forms a little diamond symbol, as you can see. And this is kind of our
Oh.
signature thing that we like to do for California DECA. And then Josephine, would you like to take the photo?
Yeah, I can take the photo. So if anyone else that's in the call wants to be a part of this group photo, we'll be sharing this on Instagram. I'll give you a second to turn on your camera if you feel ready. But just throw up your deck of diamond as soon as you are, if you would like to be involved. Yeah, the second I mentioned Instagram, everyone wants to come
All
and be a
cameras
part
on.
of it. I know.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, ready? Throw your deck of diamonds up and don't forget to smile. 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Okay. Hopefully no one blinked. I think we should be good though.
Yay, tag me,
Yay.
please.
Yes,
Yes, we
100%.
will.
Thank you so much. And I'll pin Ella again to fully close out the call.
Yes, thank you guys all so much again for joining tonight. And we're really, really, really glad to have Miss Cami Dunaway here to kick off our very first industry professional champ camp. And we hope that you guys enjoyed. So have a great evening, and we're excited for our next one.
Thanks, everybody.